I'm your cult boyfriend. Today we are talking about Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, a Sarah Sugarman film from 2004. The thing that becomes undeniably clear when you rewatch the Lindsay Lohan teen films of the 2000s is that she was my generation's Molly Ringwald, unquestionably. I think that Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen and Mean Girls both came out in 2004, as well as like Freaky Friday from 2003. These definitely have the same kind of power as the Molly Ringwald and John Hughes teen films of the 80s. The problem is, of course, that Lindsay Lohan was Molly Ringwald without John Hughes. I wish that there was someone who really saw the potential within her to do some like kind of complicated stuff within the teen film framework. Like no one wrote Pretty in Pink for her. No one wrote 16 Candles for her. She needed that. She really did need that because she really was incredible and astonishing and encapsulated, projected, symbolized so much for so many young people, myself included. I mean, she did run the world. She ruled it for a few years there, a few of my most formative years. 2004, I was 14, and I remember this was kind of the beginning of the Disney child star to tabloid pipeline, from Disney star to socialite and party girl pipeline. This was kind of the start of that, or at least at its most magnified and relevant. I've talked often on this channel of how like the horror genre from like 95 to 2000 was all about postmodernism, was all about the society of the spectacle. It played with meta narratives and manipulated them in ways that implicated the viewer. And I thought that they were very sincere films, but they were also extremely nihilistic in their own peculiar ways. And I think that real life tragedies like Columbine and 9/11 kind of killed the postmodern horror film. And oh, Final Destination put the nail in the coffin by opening with a fucking plane crash. Oh my God, guys. So what horror did was return. We call it the return on the channel. I believe Isabel, who comes on the channel, came up with that term, and it's very fitting. They return to the visual stylings and the filmic grammar of 70s exploitation, returned back to the basics, to the fundamentals of the genre, as a response to 9/11 and Columbine. But I think that keeping it within horror is rather limiting. I think that every genre did this, actually. I think action certainly did this. I think that comedy did this in a large way. And I think that teen films were absolutely no different because teen films were intimately associated with horror films anyway. As the most popular horror films of the late 90s and very, very early 2000s were teen slasher movies, which were written by people like Kevin Williamson, who are the masters of teen melodrama. So I think that teen films and horror films are intimately linked, and I definitely feel like teen films went through a return after these events as well, these real life tragedies, and a return in the teen film is returning to 80s basics, returning to Molly Ringwald. That's what I see Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen as, and it's what I see Mean Girls as well. Mean Girls is just I think it's an incredible film. I think it's beautiful and very funny kind of film, very emblematic. I don't feel the same way about Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, but you can see a lot of the moves that teen film, the genre, they were like trying to sanitize its own genre. And who better to sanitize an inherently rebellious genre of film than Disney? Because Disney made Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen. They also made Freaky Friday. Disney did a lot of heavy lifting to sanitize the teen film genre. That's also probably why Mean Girls is actually a masterpiece, because they they didn't really care about sanitizing, but they did have something in common with Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen and with Freaky Friday. With Lindsay Lohan's teen films, the thing that I think what associates them most intimately like with the Molly Ringwald films is not simply because we have a teenage redhead who is kind of an unseen girl or an outcast in her own way, learning to transcend social hierarchies. Not exactly that. It's the fairy tale component of it. Not even a component. These films are fairy tales, much like 16 Candles was undeniably a fairy tale, a very good fairy tale, but a fairy tale nonetheless. And no one's better at making fairy tales than Disney. And I think that that's what most closely links the Lindsay Lohan teen films of the 2000s to the Molly Ringwald ones. And what makes my comparison most apt, I think that when John Hughes was using Molly Ringwald in Pretty in Pink in 16 Candles, she was she was incredible in the films, mostly because John Hughes understood her so well. Like she was his muse, in a very large way. John Hughes was giving the unseen girl her cinematic moment, like her fairy tale writ large on screen. The unseen girl, the unseen archetype, and I think that Lindsay Lohan can embody that. Pretty well. It's just that the unseen girl has modified itself as an archetype. It's now like a it's now a girl who is unseen the way that she wants to be seen, and a young girl who sees herself within all of these fantastical situations. The Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen. It likes to do these silly and pretty goofy, but visually interesting. I wouldn't say visually amazing. Like, look at this shot right here. What the fuck is this? I cannot believe this shot exists. And Sarah Sugarman, bravo on this shot. There are a lot of parts where Lindsay Lohan would fantasize about her perfect cinematic existence, and we'd get lost in these like hyper theatrical, incredibly contrived situations that are musical as well. They're lyrical and they're absurd. The point of Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen is obviously that you don't want your life to be like a movie or like a song or like a piece of pop art. When something is truly cinematic, to view something truly cinematically is to objectify and minimize those people in your life. Those people that you're supposed to care about. You don't want your life to be treated like cinema. You want your life to be authentic and sincere. It's a fine message to send through a fairy tale. And it's interestingly the same message that Kevin Williamson tried to tell through Dawson's Creek. It's just it lacks all that sophistication, which is fine. We're not here to talk about sophistication. We're here to talk about the impact of Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, which I feel was very large, not simply because I view Lindsay Lohan as my generation's Molly Ringwald, and with that comes like a new set of symbolism, like a new set of truths, a new poetic vocabulary to choose from. Because Lindsay Lohan, while Molly Ringwald and Lindsay Lohan have quite a bit in common, there are some unique differences that make Lindsay Lohan stand out and make her like incredibly and entirely relevant and palpable for millennials. She really embodied and expressed in its totality the anxieties, frustrations, and expectations, the cinematic expectations of my generation. She did it so well, and those expectations are increasingly narcissistic, increasingly fame hungry, increasingly self-obsessed. And I think that when you are viewing those kinds of traits through teen films, they're easier to forgive and they're easier to empathize with because they're kids and they're growing up. And in Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, like Mary or Lola, the character Lindsay Lohan plays, has so obviously been deeply affected and influenced by old Hollywood, by pop music, that is it even her fault that she wants to like lead a truly narcissistic and melodramatic and insincere life? No, it's not at all at all. But that's a larger discussion that this film isn't interested in having. But nonetheless, it does express that through Lindsay Lohan, through one of the great icons of my generation, one of the great teen icons of my world, honestly. Another reason I think it's fabulous is because it's Lindsay Lohan versus Megan Fox, and Megan Fox is incredible in this film. I love her. There's just something so powerful. Every part of me is millennial, and every part of me just falls into ecstasy when I see Lindsay Lohan and Megan Fox, like the two idols of my generation, like the two defining like starlets of my generation, along with Paris Hilton, but she's not here right now, is she? But it's Lindsay Lohan and Megan Fox. Like, is that a threat? Are you threatening me? Yeah, it is a threat. Like, it's goofy, obviously, because it's in this Disney movie, but it's still so powerful. And it's even more interesting when you hear that they did not get along with each other at all, that they had a real life rivalry, and they didn't have to fake the animosity that the characters felt towards each other. But there's something unbelievably and uniquely powerful about seeing Lindsay Lohan and Megan Fox so early in their career at this point in 2004 in this adversarial kind of dynamic. And there's so much gravity uh, to them when they share a frame. And you're like, these are the spiritual guides of millennials, and here they are. Here they are. And I thought it was magical. Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, like it is basically a glorified Disney Channel original movie. That's how it feels, which is kind of interesting and fun. It's pointless to analyze deeply because it's kind of why I like Disney Channel original movies. They all have like the most flawed and nearly psychotic psychologies possible in them. Like some of my favorite DComs are like um, Smart House or Descendants, Johnny Tsunami, Cadet Kelly. They're all fucking insane. Halloween Town. Their psychologies are all completely bonkers. It feels like someone was allowed to write TV movies for the Disney Channel with absolutely no oversight or management. They just put something together and it was fucking insane. Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen has that kind of energy to it. And speaking of Lindsay Lohan, I think that one of my favorite Disney Channel original movies when I was growing up and actually watching them on the network was Get a Clue. Get a Clue was so cool to me I don't know when that came out, probably 2002 or 2001 or something. I was incredibly young, but I remember really loving it. Just a little bit off topic, but not really, because like this has the same psychotic psychology as your typical Disney Channel original movie, which all of them, yeah, are deeply psychotic and psychologically flawed. But Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, I don't think it's like a great or very interesting film on its own. I think it's very interesting because there are so many powerful images in it, and you are able to interact with iconography, with millennial iconography, like in the moment, and understand why it meant so much, why the new millennial mindset was so deeply narcissistic, yet had this deep inner core, this that was defined by its naivete and by its vulnerability. And when you mix narcissism with vulnerability and you bathe it all with naivete, you get the millennial, you get anxiety, you get the sign of our age, you get Lindsay Lohan, and I think you get an incredible performance, but more important than performance, you get an unbelievable new icon. You get an unbelievable legend, and Lindsay Lohan was certainly a legend. And it's also just fascinating to see Megan Fox uh, kind of start to form hers as well. I think Lindsay Lohan ruled the early 2000s in a very large way, and Megan Fox took us into the 2010s. Like Megan Fox came around near the end of that decade to to really be the physical cultural marker of where um, sexual appetite, where narcissistic philosophy was at by like 2007 to 2011. I think that's really when Megan Fox ruled the world. So it's cool seeing her start to form her icon, her emblematic status in Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, while Lindsay Lohan was already well on her way to establishing herself as the millennial Molly Ringwald, which is something that I can't get out of my head now because that's how I view her. The fairy tale aspect is undeniable, it's palpable, and it's visceral, and it's actually really cool and effective. Lindsay Lohan, I think, was the icon, was the Molly Ringwald that I needed personally. Same with, I think, a countless amount of other people because she actually was symbolically heavy, powerful. You know, uh, her cinematic image is just undeniable. It's great. As a film, of course, it leaves a lot to be desired, but it's a no fault of like Lindsay Lohan, Megan Fox, or Allison Pill, who I think were very good in the film. If you want to blame anyone, blame Disney for sanitizing the teen film genre. But at the same time, that's also a fascinating concept too, like the ways they chose to sanitize it. What was honestly simplification, and by glorifying narcissism and being so cripplingly naive. Like that's how Disney chose to do it, and it's also fascinating because obviously they're trying to sanitize these kids, and yet like rebellion does slip through. Like a large part of this movie is kind of like inappropriate in the sense that Lola is desperately trying to elope with a very adult rock star. Like she's madly obsessed with him romantically and erotically. Like there are inappropriate things that just can't help but slip through here. You can't exactly sanitize the teen film. It doesn't really work correctly. But it's also fascinating in an additional kind of meta layering to it where Lindsay Lohan just a year or two later would go completely off the rails, as would Megan Fox later on. How Disney tries to, it's almost that Disney like deliberately infantilizing these teen situations kind of perverts them in their own ironic way, and it kind of just advertises how naive Disney is or Disney was with their cinematic materials. Like Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, I don't think it's a great film, but I think it's massively interesting. And definitely worth discourse and discussion. And I think I've only really scraped the iceberg here. Thought it was very enjoyable. Everything from the Dance Dance Revolution battle, epic battle between Lindsay Lohan and Megan Fox to Lindsay's daydreams, to Lindsay's big song at the end. I actually think that she was a black brown teenage drama queen. I think that that's actually really catchy, and I think it's pretty good to be honest. And I think that that in itself is not like simply being a time capsule. It's not keeping within a stasis. It's interesting when teen films started focusing on putting their characters on a lighted stage with perfect choreography, like because that feeds into the narcissism, but as well as the vulnerability or the inherent vulnerability of expressing your emotions on a stage. But it's all about naivety as well. But narcissism, self-obsession, kind of that's the watchword. That's the watchword of the 2000s, which I think culminates beautifully by the time Gossip Girl comes around. Narcissism is weaponized and it's transcended, and Gossip Girl is the greatest um, teen show ever, and it's the greatest teen story ever. Gossip Girl is the best thing that ever came out of the teen genre, and I don't think we would get to Gossip Girl unless Disney and Lindsay Lohan, Megan Fox, and Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen laid down the narcissistic foundation so well with Freaky Friday, Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, and Mean Girls. That they didn't like introduce narcissism so beautifully and potently into the teen genre with those three films, quite like the Molly trilogy, but the Molly trilogy did so much for 14 films in the 80s, 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, and Pretty in Pink. The Lindsay trilogy, I think, did a lot as well, but it also kind of opened the floodgates to nihilism, which in the end made teen films a lot more interesting. So it's through this very sanitized view of teen life, like Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, you get from Disney to absolute, complete, and bleak nihilism, sexual, social nihilism that Gossip Girl would go on to capitalize on and beautifully investigate and explore. And that's, you don't get to Gossip Girl without going to Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, which is so fascinating. It's just so beautiful. I think that's all I have to say. Have a good day.